Okay, I guess I will start it. So welcome to, what is this, the fifth one, sixth one, fourth one? Up there?
Fifth.
Fifth one. So
Yeah.
fifth meeting of what is now MetaNet ICU. I will again just facilitate this. I'll try to be a little more structured than I think the last few have been. Or if you have a question, you can either type it out in the chat, or if you raise your hand by hitting the participants section in the bottom, you can actually raise your hand, and if you want to actually ask the question yourself, you can do so. But you might have to unmute yourself. Other than that, I will pass it to you, Ryan. So Ryan is talking about business applications, I assume probably associated with them. So go for it.
All right. You guys able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I wanted to say, so Shatters is going to talk about the meeting and everything last week, but I just want to give a few words about that to start with. So we had a gathering of companies, primarily wallet companies, and a few others, to talk about our sort of standards. And we'll see what Shatters says about it. I don't want to give any details because we're not ready to announce anything that happened. But I just wanted to say it was very interesting that it was extremely productive. And about 2 days into this meeting, we actually had already done more than I thought we could have in the entire week. And so by the end of the week, we did way, way, way above and beyond what I thought was actually possible in 1 week. So basically it just has a lot to do with things involving standards amongst different wallets. And yeah, it's extremely productive. And I think there's just a clear lesson there, which is basically no one is arguing about the protocol, which is a huge, sort of win. That we have that matter settled, which is extremely, extremely useful to be able to just start making progress on substantive things, rather than just bickering about the protocol, basically. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, but hopefully Shatters will share whatever information he thinks is appropriate to share about that meeting later on, and people can ask him questions. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, so two other things. So basically one is onboarding and then one is MoneyButton. So I'll talk about onboarding first, just because I think this applies to basically everyone in the entire ecosystem. So onboarding from the perspective of MoneyButton is simply the idea that you see MoneyButton on a new website and you're a normal person who knows nothing about cryptocurrency. Now you click MoneyButton and what happens? And the problem is that most people don't already have Bitcoin SV. So how do they actually use MoneyButton as a consumer? And some time ago, I basically, around the time we were launching this, it was obvious that this was going to be, no matter how good MoneyButton was, this was sort of the top issue, that we have to solve this to actually get adoption. I mean, if we don't solve that issue, we're sort of limited to a small niche audience. So it's a very important problem. And I've said this before, I'll say it again just because I think it's important. There's sort of a general solution that it took me a whole lot of thought to arrive at an answer that actually seems to make sense. So there are many different ways you can try to onboard people. For anybody that ever tries to do this, you'll realize it's easier said than done. People just can't just buy it with a credit card. If you don't believe me, just try to do it. It is really not that easy. It's good to have that as an option. But we really want to replicate an onboarding experience that would be similar to any other app that the user might have, which is basically, you should be able to basically just start using it right away without having to go through a week-long KYC process or something like that. So the idea I had that there's a whole video that Daniel Kuriewicz and I did where we talked about this thing for an hour. And the idea is that basically once MoneyButton is actually earning money through any mechanism at all, we can start to compute things like how much money are we earning per user per year, and then do things like start channeling some of that money back out to the users. In fact, what we'll probably do right away is actually channel all of that money back out to users. So you can imagine ways this could fit together. And again, I'm giving this from the perspective of MoneyButton, but this could apply in a similar way to basically any crypto-related experience, where if the users need to actually have it to do something, then you can apply something similar. And so what we'll do is probably gamify giving it away. We can't just simply give people crypto basically because it would be very easy to game it. So there are a number for them to game it. So a number of things we can do. We can do things like give it out at random. And I think that will help for some people. We can also do things like where we partner with apps and we give it to users of those apps. And so we'll literally be giving it away because there's no faster way for someone to get crypto. And this will be funded by business models that are basically sort of wrapped around MoneyButton. MoneyButton will still be free, but there'll be things where basically if you're operating a business, you're probably going to want to be paying us for certain things. And we'll also probably monetize the onboarding and the offboarding. And the way that will work is if you actually do buy it with a credit card, which sadly will not work for most people, but it will work for some of them, we'll be able to monetize that. So we take a % of that, and that's the money that we can actually use to help onboard other people. And we can also take a percentage of offboarding. So that gives you a flavor of how this works. So this is, it's a real answer that we won't be, it's not simply letting the users buy it with a credit card. I think it's a really good idea to sort of gamify it and give it to some people for free so that they can basically onboard instantly. So that's the idea. Let's see here. A couple other things I want to say about that. One is that we want to actually retain these users. So this will probably have to come along with things like a market that the users can somehow earn money. So they can do this right now if they have a website and they plug MoneyButton on their website and they actually create value. We can do other things as well, like referral systems and affiliate systems, where if you're willing to do some type of work of some kind, you can monetize other things. You can monetize sharing of content. You could monetize, imagine there's something like, I'll just throw this out there. I don't know if Court is on this call or listening to this, but wouldn't it be interesting if $5bucks.com had a affiliate system where you could share $5bucks.com with other people, and when they go to $5bucks.com, if they actually pay for something, you get some of the money. So you're incentivized to share this around and presumably help to onboard these people so that they can actually pay for that. This would provide a way for people to earn money, which is itself an onboarding mechanism. So someone who doesn't already have crypto could actually start earning small amounts of money by sharing $5 links, for example. Now, I don't know what $5 plans are. I'm just using that as an example. But if we built tooling that allowed people to more easily create affiliate systems and referral systems, this would be useful to, if not to $5, then to any sort of similar app that wants to earn more money and allow their users to actually earn money by basically being an affiliate. So that gives you an idea of the types of things we can do where we empower people to earn Bitcoin SV. There are tons of other examples I could give. I've shared other documents with tons and tons of apps that all revolve around earning money. So the onboarding, the way you connect the dots here is basically something like, I think it's a very good idea to gift small amounts of money to some, if not all, of the new users. And this is attached to a business model where, again, some or in the early days, all of the revenue is actually given back out to new users. But then you have to keep new users around. So that will involve ultimately converting them to some type of paying user, or they have other users on board or whatever. And people will have to attach this to mechanisms to make it easy for people to earn it. That's an onboarding mechanism. Okay, so that's my thoughts on onboarding. I've said most of this before, but I hope that this is useful to anybody who's dealing with this issue, that there aren't not all exchanges support Bitcoin SV and so on. So I think it's really important that we keep working on this and treat this as a priority and be able to onboard the users. Okay, so are there any questions about that or comments before I move on to something else? I'll give a couple seconds here.
No, I'll just quickly jump in before I run. With a number of things that are happening, there will be SV to fiat exchanges in the future. You link that to something like atomic swaps, you have the ability to issue fiat coin, and then MoneyButton and everything else can start extending into that. Now, I know some people think fiat's actually a bad thing, but if you have a deflationary currency running right next to and linked into a inflationary currency, then Gresham's law.
I see. So you're saying that, so first of all, basically it's going to be a lot easier for the users if they can use fiat, but this will still ultimately encourage them to switch to Bitcoin SV as a sort of holder of currency.
If you can instantly switch, and over time, as we start using, the value goes up, why would you hold in Rand or something like this?
Yeah, agreed. Well, we need that piece. We need the actual sort of fiat tokens to exist to be able to do that. I do think it's a good idea. I'll just say there's one other reason to do it that way, which is basically that from their perspective, if they can hold their local currency, or if not their local one, then just the US dollar or something like that, then, the price doesn't go up and down regularly. And they actually understand what it is. So that's another reason to do, sort of fiat tokens. If that becomes a real option, and this isn't something we're like focused on, but it's something that we're interested in, it would be extremely useful. So for sure.
The patents are all granted now. We've gone past the 9-month objection period, so I can start touting them without everyone jumping on this. And what that means is over the next year, we're going to be having some interesting things occurring.
All right, then. Well, from our perspective, we'll just wait and see what those interesting things are and bring them into our system as soon as we can.
Anyway, I just thought I'd pop in. I just watched yours, and hello all, and I'll talk soon.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, anything else on onboarding? I don't see any questions in the chat there.
I might. I can't recall if it was during the workshop last week or maybe at the pub afterwards. It was another idea, I guess, for onboarding, and I can't even recall if it was you I was talking to about it, actually, Ryan. I had thought a little while ago about the idea of like rebates and cashbacks. So you often see, companies selling vacuum cleaners or whatever will offer you $100 rebate instead of actually just discounting the price. And I think the reason why they do that is because to get it, you've got to, fill in a form and mail it off and whatnot. And they probably rely on the fact that a bunch of people just don't ever bother doing it. So I wonder if there's some scope there to put together a kind of a rebate package with all the software set up and ready for people to ready for companies or whatever to make use of it, because the same premise, I guess, would apply. We know crypto is not that easy, especially for your mum and dad off the street. So probably fairly safe to say that some people are not going to go and claim their BSV back, but and that provides the companies the incentive to actually use that kind of mechanism. But the ones that do potentially become BSV users. I don't think this is not the answer to the problem, but it's one of potentially many different ways we can help introduce people and get them on board.
In your idea, are the rebates like a token, like a rebate token that's given out by some particular merchant, or is?
Well, I hadn't actually thought to do it as tokens. I haven't thought this through in any great level of detail, but my thinking was just BSV. It'd be $100 worth of BSV, and the merchants they'd probably just do the exchange at the time.
I think that's a workable idea if it's paired with something like $5, where basically, if the user is ultimately actually spending Bitcoin SV. So either that, or it has to be a merchant where basically they're favorable to this in some way. It lowers their fees or something like that, where they have an interest in actually doing it. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's a type of thing, like if you look at my document I don't think I had that particular one on there, but I think the real answer here is it's not like there isn't one. There isn't one simple answer. There is a what should we do first answer. But ultimately, who knows how people will actually be onboarded. That sounds like a good way to onboard some people. And good.
What about being paid to watch ads. I mean, if you come to a MoneyButton based site or something for the first time and you haven't got any, being given the option, okay, well, watch this 30-second ad, you might only earn a few cents out of it, but it's probably enough for you to click MoneyButton and open an article.
I think it's an excellent idea. You know, to do something like that, we would have to basically partner with some type of ad company. So ads are primarily dominated by Google and Facebook. If you know, basically anybody else that's trying to earn money from ads is, at least on the internet anyway, is like they're dwarfed by Google and Facebook. So ideally it would be one of those. That would obviously be huge to get Google or Facebook on board. If it's not them, it would have to be some other, you know, ad agency or something like that, which would almost certainly be smaller. It could be that something like a newspaper would be interested. I think that I mean, we're not pitching businesses right now. We're not, at least not businesses like that, until we've solved the onboarding problem. But I guess I haven't really thought about what if the pitch basically included their partnership in a way that would solve the onboarding problem. And that would be a way to do it, that they would earn money. That the user would earn money from watching ads. That's definitely a part of the vision of MoneyButton, is that's like a, you know, that's how it should work.
I think it's a behavior that a lot of people are used to. I don't know if I should disclose this dirty little secret, but I play the occasional idle clicker game and match 3 type games on my mobile, and you're always getting offers. You know, watch this 20-second ad for a few free gold stars or an extra life or something like that. And I actually do. I click them. Half the time I don't watch them. I just put the phone down until the ad's over. But there's quite a lot of people out there that are actually trained into this watch an ad for a reward type behavior. So I think there's some scope there. Yeah.
So I think it's an excellent idea. Somebody suggested, or so Kevin suggested here in the chat, what about getting paid for user testing? That is also a very good idea. Where, like, we've used services like this before, where you have somebody use your app and you can watch them basically use the app, and can they figure out what to do? And if they can't, you learn really key things about where your app is terrible. Things like that. So ads are great because it's already universal. That would be small amounts of money. So it'd be like a larger audience, smaller amounts of money. Something like user testing would be a smaller number of people, but a larger amount of money. So they seem complementary to me in that case. And this is part of, like, I think some type of earning mechanism needs to ultimately be built into this. I mean, I think that long-term people will be earning this because it's going to be a real economy, and it ultimately has to be that way. So earning money for things like that sounds like an excellent idea.
So I want to mention Sugar has his hand up. So I think go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to point out an approach that we're kind of doing in Crypto Fights, is the project I'm working on. It's a game where there's actually going to be a billboard space within the game, and we're using a sponsored transaction where, I mean, hopefully we're going to have to figure out how to sell this, but where essentially people will pay us to put advertising data onto an op return, which then we will spend that transaction to the user, and then they will spend it to put it onto the game. And so that advertisement actually gets stuck immutably in the game. So when anyone watches it later on or views it on the Block Explorer, it's actually going to be embedded in the game, and we're using that to pay for the players' transactions.
Okay, so the players don't actually have to have crypto. Is that basically part of what you're saying?
Correct.
That's an excellent idea. I mean, I think that sounds like it's the type of thing that applies to a game where the user's actions are predominantly small. So,
yeah,
you know, rather than have the users earn money for looking at an ad and then paying the money, you're earning money for ads and they don't have to pay at all. And I think it's a great idea for something like that. Yeah. So, I mean, just to connect that to MoneyButton, you know, we are partially about small payments, but we're about large payments too. And things like basically ultimately actually getting people paid. I mean, we want people to earn money with MoneyButton. Some of these people, probably most of them, already have, well, maybe not. It's hard to say, but they may not already have Bitcoin SV. Those people are being onboarded by earning it. And it has to be like, if it's significant, I mean, that's really the vision with MoneyButton. So I think that sounds like a very appropriate solution for your case. We've thought about things like that, where like basically we would avoid actually doing real transactions. So we could do things like coupons or, like a MoneyButton token where it's worth some amount of BSV, but we hold it. And there are all sorts of reasons why we're not doing that. Like one is legal. We don't want the liability of that legally from a security perspective and so on. Also, there's a bigger picture thing here, which I think that ultimately consumers need to actually have it. And so I feel like we're avoiding the real problem if we do something different. But I think for a video game, that sounds like a very appropriate idea. It seems like that's probably going to work for a video game.
Well, let's hope so.
Okay, there's another question here. Have you considered opt-in choice? Consider percentage as a second output. Oh, okay. So, great question. Okay, so it turns out we actually have considered exactly this. So the idea is that what if, sorry?
If you just want to repeat the question for anyone that watches this later.
So the idea is that what if our users could somehow give an opt-in percentage for onboarding? We have had exactly this idea. In fact, I may as well go ahead and share the entire idea because it's not something we've announced, but it definitely is an idea. We're going to almost certainly do something like this, where we have an onboarding fund and either the senders or the recipients can opt in to giving a percentage to the onboarding fund. And the onboarding fund is used exclusively for onboarding new users. So for people who are enthusiasts who are not trying to maximize revenue and they're willing to give a little gift knowing what it's for, people might be willing to donate to something like that. And that basically gives us a revenue, if I understand what you're saying, because I might be jumping. I didn't read the entire comment there, but it was so similar to the idea we had. I just assumed the rest of it. But it sounds like onboarding pool and everything. You really have the exact idea here. That's exactly what we would do. I think it's an excellent idea. We are going to give some of our existing funds to this as well. So we're going to sort of kickstart this idea by just basically giving some out before we even earn it. And so I think that's an excellent idea. But I don't really think that donations are like the answer. But as we're saying before, I think what even is the answer? I think it's probably a variety of things. So another comment here. I think Brad is just responding. Brad, if you have an actual question, maybe write it in one sentence or something so I can see. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next subject, which is just another thing I wanted to mention, which is that MoneyButton is actually a lot more powerful than most people seem to realize. This is not just a tipping button. So I just wanted to briefly overview some stuff with MoneyButton. In fact, I'm going to try to share my screen. I'll do this really quickly here, but let's see here. So let me share my screen. I'm on there. And okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to just run through this in a speedy way. This is our documentation. It's at docs.moneybutton.com. MoneyButton is not just a tipping button. It has a very powerful API that can do lots of things. When you make an HTML widget like this, it looks very simple. This is like the simplest way to do it. You say, who is it going to? What's the amount? What's the currency? But we support all of these other things that give you some really advanced abilities. So there's a simple built-in op return ability. You can do things like, first of all, really basic things like the label and the success message and so on. We support every currency and et cetera. We support passing in a list of outputs. So you can pay multiple people in the same swipe. So you can pay yourself. I believe, Joel, you're actually using this inside the MetaNet stuff. You've got you're making use of this. There are a number of different interesting apps that actually use multiple outputs. This is necessary to be able to rebuild something like yours, where the voting model involves paying each earlier recipient. You can do that with MoneyButton. And a bunch of different sort of standard features, like you get the merchant or the developer can pass in data or an ID to track payments correctly. This is important for doing things like shopping carts. And there's also callbacks. So you can respond to the payment, respond to error messages. You can make the button editable, which means the user can type in the amount. And there's a sort of a dev mode, which basically means it does not actually make a payment. There are different like APIs. So there are different like ways to use this. So you can use the pure JavaScript API, which also lets you do things like automatically update the button, so that if you want to change something, such as I give the example of bitpaste.app, as you type it in, it updates the amount of money that it costs. And so you can update buttons on the fly that way. There is also an auth system, which I've been promising people for quite some time. I will be documenting. It is not currently documented, but this is a priority for us this week. So we'll probably have this documented this week so that you understand how to use the auth system. This lets you do basically sign in with MoneyButton. And this is extremely powerful. You can track payments and have a real social network built into MoneyButton. We'll be documenting some of these other things too. We're actually creating components so that people can create like forms and stuff with MoneyButton that actually look nice and that conform to the appearance and aesthetics of MoneyButton. Now, another thing I want to also talk about, I don't have any docs here, but I can show you a completely different page here. And we'll go look at this library. So I'll give a brief overview of what this is, because this is one of the interesting things I learned last week at this wallet workshop, was that this is actually widely used in the ecosystem. This library, BSV, is a fork of Bitcore libcache, which is a fork of Bitcore, or Bitcore lib. And it is a JavaScript Bitcoin SV library that, funny story, I actually wrote like probably about 50% of this library way back in 2013 and 2014. So if you go back and dig through the commit history there and see, I created many of the basics, including things like ECDSA and the format of a transaction and stuff like that. All that's in here because I was working at BitPay back then, and BitPay needed this library, and we had another one, but it had a terrible API because we had a fork of Bitcoin.js. So I ended up rewriting a bunch of stuff so it had a consistent API that would become this library. So it's a funny quirk of history that basically last fall, it became clear that we needed a new JavaScript Bitcoin library for ourselves and for others. And so we just forked Bitcore libcache, and this ended up being used by basically everyone who's doing JavaScript. So the funny quirk is just that I wrote half of it, and the universe slingshotted this code back around to myself, and I'm maintaining my own former code base again. And we now support things like, you can thank people like Full Cycle Mining and Monkey Lord have created some really excellent recent improvements, like including the new all the new opcodes. We have, so like opmol and things like that, all those new opcodes are supported. We have now also standardized on Electrum ECIS. And so this is a thing where I don't know how many people know stuff like this, but ECIS is a way to encrypt data to a public key. So this isn't simply a Bitcoin library. We kind of separate the core Bitcoin functionality from a few other critical components that actually turn out to be very, very useful for Bitcoin-related apps. And ECIS is something that's not being widely used right now, but I believe it will be extremely useful to every single wallet imminently. And I don't want to share details, but I'll just say that based on the results of the wallet workshop, I would say this is all but assured to be used by everyone pretty soon, which is just the idea of basically being able to encrypt data to someone's public key. Very, very quick overview. It's not just Bitcoin, but also something called Message, which is a standardized way of signing a message with the Bitcoin private key. Mnemonic is just a way of deriving a mnemonic that basically every wallet uses, and using that to derive BIP32 keys, and then ECIS, which I already mentioned. So when we update our documentation this week, we're actually going to be updating all of this documentation as well. So we treat this about equally as seriously as the main MoneyButton app, just because it's so widely used. And I've just realized there's terrible information about Bitcoin out there, and I was joking with people, but it's not really a joke, last week at the wallet workshop, that basically if people go out there looking for information about Bitcoin, what they actually find is mostly propaganda. So what they actually see is, the joke is that they search for what is a Bitcoin transaction, and what they learn is that a Bitcoin transaction is bad and that you ought to be using Lightning Network instead. Again, it's a joke, but not really. I mean, that's the type of information that you see out there. So just documenting the basics of what is a Bitcoin transaction and private keys and how to do things with BSV, I think will be very valuable. So all this stuff, I've actually done all this before. It's a long story, but I was a teacher with Blockchain University way back in the day, and I'm just going to repeat all that stuff and put all the new information out there in a way that explains what this stuff is and how to use it, so that these developers who want to do things, and there are a lot of them, but don't know where to begin, will be able to do so. And we don't have to refer them to completely inaccurate sources of material, which I won't name, but there are many of them out there. So I think that'll be very useful to people. Okay, so that's actually all I wanted to say. Are there any questions about any of this stuff, or any other general questions about anything related to MoneyButton or anything else I said? Or for that matter, anything related to other businesses from my perspective. So I think I was supposed to be talking about not necessarily strictly MoneyButton, but anything related to like operating a business around Bitcoin SV, or anything else about other businesses.
I do have a question for you, Ryan.
Yes.
With regards to the BSV library, what kind of QA do you guys have internally? Because if, as you said, everyone's using it and it's pretty much the go-to library for anything Bitcoin related on any of the 3 Bitcoins. Obviously, if every wallet's using it, every web app is using it, and one bug gets through that's serious, everyone is affected.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you guys, since you're taking on as MoneyButton to maintain it, what's your QA behind the library?
Very good question. Very probing question, Brad. The QA process is I look at the pull request, and if I like it, I merge it. So, what you're looking at is basically, in this case, things like the new script interpreter. You should know that the library is actually exceptionally well tested. So when, Dave, AKA Full Cycle Mining, added the new script interpreter stuff, I told him there are tests for this stuff. So look inside the Node software, plug the same exact tests in. There are test vectors. We are using the same exact test vectors for that stuff that the Node software uses. So there's that. So anything that's actually sensitive like that, you can know that it is well, like it's like literally like something like 99% test coverage. So there's that about it. I will say though that this was something that came up at the wallet workshop, is that to the best of my knowledge, the library has actually never been audited. And bear in mind, this is actually being used not just by us, but forks of Bitcore and Bitcore Lib and Bitcore Libcash are widely used throughout the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem. And it's based on some sort of JavaScript cryptography that is, that all these wallets are using. So this is good and bad. I mean, the good is that you can know that, basically every other company is using the same underlying crypto, and you can also know that our library is very well tested should something ever break. But it sure would be nice to have it audited. That seems like a good thing, but I would just say that MoneyButton will not be auditing BSV. That's a very expensive thing to actually pay people to audit it. So that's what the situation is.
I can tell you from past experiences, your security audit is going to cost you well in the order of 6 figures.
Okay.
Quite a long way into that.
That's way beyond, way beyond the budget of MoneyButton. So. Look, it's not like we're going to go out there making radical changes to this thing. So there have been bugs before. I will say that, there was a bug that was introduced by a developer that created issues around basically deriving keys in a way that was not reproducible. And it was a serious issue, but they fixed it. So if you notice a bug, let us know in a secure way, and we'll fix it.
I assume you're tracking the commits made from the Bitcore guys as well.
I am not personally watching that. I mean, that sounds like a good idea. Maybe one way to look at this is, give us suggestions about how this could be improved, because I'm taking over this library because it was the obvious natural thing to do. There had to be a library, and I'm so familiar with this code base that it was very appropriate to just start managing this. And other people decided to use it. It's not like we had other people use it. It just made sense to fork Bitcore Libcash. So what should we do? Given limited, resources. So something like tracking Bitcore sounds like a good idea.
I will say that because of the prevalence of usage of Node.js in the Bitcoin SV space, we're actually giving serious thought to how we're going to bring the Nakasendo SDK across and make it available to JavaScript users. So I'm not sure that it's probably not quite a natural fit to merge it into BSV project, make the two projects merge together. I think they'll naturally just sit side by side and be quite complementary to each other. But I do envisage that Nchain's professional services will start using a lot more of JavaScript in the future. So when we get to that point, we've got a pretty big QA team. We'll probably contribute resources to.
So let me just give you basically a crystal clear sort of way that over time you guys could actually, because what's going to happen is with your Nakasendo API, you need basic crypto stuff that is going to already be in BSV. So somehow you're going to solve that problem in a way that you think is sufficiently high quality. And that is the intersection between these two libraries, basically, that whatever that is, if it matches your standards, well, you guys are the most well-resourced R&D firm, and that's going to be as good as it gets. So we can somehow, whatever that intersection is where we would actually end up using your, solutions to that stuff. Assuming it's all open source and all that stuff. Either that, or you'll find what you'll find though, and I don't know how much you've looked into JavaScript at all, but you will see what we're doing is what everyone in the crypto world does. And again, this is I hype myself up to say this, but I'm the one that wrote originally even things like ECDSA. So I believe they're all using the same thing that is the original code that I wrote, including even ECDSA and stuff like that. And so it's like if there was some basic error, it probably would have already been found. And we're not going to be mucking around with that stuff. So you might find that you actually end up using exactly the same thing. This stuff goes back to 2014. So, that's not changing.
So I'll just say, looks like Hassan has his hand up, and I guess we'll cut it out after that, and then I'll just remind everyone at the end, if everyone wants to stick around, you can have some unrecorded chat as well.
Okay. Yes. Hi, Ryan. For MoneyButton, why don't you, for example, start atomic swap for the other crypto? So I think maybe this is from we can start in the first level until the people start using BSV. So they need atomic swap.
Well, I mean, atomic swaps are a good thing to have. And if anybody wants to work on that, that's a great thing. But I would look at it from a business perspective, which is doing atomic swaps inside MoneyButton is not a trivial technical undertaking. And if we do that, that basically says the market is whatever other cryptos already use that, which is actually not very big. I mean, we are so much better off doing anything that's actually going to get some mainstream audience than atomic swaps between Litecoin and BSV. So, that's how I see that. It's just like, that's a whole lot of work for something that is strictly niche. And I don't even see that working long-term. If we did that, it would be a near-term solution only. I would rather explore every other solution that could actually be used by mainstream people and not people who already have Litecoin or something like that. So that's just my perspective on that. It's a purely what market are we actually going for, and going for the Litecoin market, it just is not what we're going for at all.
Just make it for one-way swap. So I think the people will start to understand that BSV is the solution. So we can then later on change all our crypto to BSV. But until they just arrive to MoneyButton, so they need to use the crypto. until now, people, the market people, I'm talking, the exchangers, everybody, they did not know exactly what the difference until now between BSV and BCH. That's the main point. If we want to hit them to start using our currency, they need to use our services.
Then let me tell you what to do. So you're good idea. Just to do one-way atomic swaps is not what it would actually be like. This would be a huge engineering undertaking. So what you should do is, if you're serious about that idea, make a business that does one-way atomic swaps from Litecoin, etc., to BSV. We will partner with you. But I don't think that is like, I think it's harder than you like. It would be extremely hard, and you're going to have to do the same business calculus I was doing, which is, doing it for real. Again, you actually do it in a way where we can plug it in and we just get BSV. We would have no reason to not use that. You take a cut or do whatever you want to do. If you can do that, great. We just plug it back in. We have a better form of shapeshift, but it would be non-trivial is all I'm saying. And, it would make sense for us to plug in somebody else's solution. I think it makes a whole lot less sense for us to actually spend a bunch of effort solving that specific problem.
Okay, the other question is, what about multi-signature wallet in MoneyButton?
Okay, so the technical goal of MoneyButton is actually to support every feature of Bitcoin SV eventually. And actually, we're quite close already. So we can support, in order to do multi-sig, well, first of all, there are two issues. One is that the only way to do multi-sig right now, at least as far as I'm aware, is with P2SH. Actually, maybe you can do normal multi-sig outputs. I'm not sure, but the way that every other wallet does it right now is, sorry, go ahead.
It's non-standard.
Okay, then you can't do it. So you'd have to use P2SH, but let's just suppose we did that. We could use P2SH right now. It is in the protocol right now. And you have to be able to manipulate inputs, either to do multi-sig or to do any other fancy thing. And we have a solution to this, which is we're going to have a UTXO API that the developer can get access to, the app can get access to. Using the UTXOs, you can spend them, and you'll be able to pass in inputs that the user swipes with MoneyButton. So there's a way we can do this that actually allows you to do anything. Once we let you manipulate inputs, you could actually build any random sophisticated wallet that does everything under the sun, tokens and privacy features and whatever you want, payment channels or anything like that, and use MoneyButton. So our solution to that is to make all this stuff as easy as possible for other developers to do. So we're kind of starting from that perspective of, okay, if we want to do cool feature X and it requires technical property Y, well, we'll do technical property Y in order to make cool feature X. But what has happened several times in MoneyButton already is that as soon as we add the technical thing, somebody else makes a cool app before we even get around to it. So long as stuff like that keeps happening, we'll keep working on basically adding the central enabling technologies into MoneyButton that make it possible for other people to make those apps. And that would include tokens, it would include multi-sig, and it would include every other thing that you can do with a Bitcoin transaction.
Yeah, that's what exactly I was talking about, because if I want to start any business and will build it in a decentralized options, so I need a multi-signature wallet.
Okay.
I don't want, for example, to make it as centralized. I will keep the money with me and you can use it. No, if it's built as a smart contract or multi-sig whatsoever. So I can be sure that the clients themselves will be happy to use this service.
Great. Then you'll be able to use this when we add those features to MoneyButton.
Yeah, I think I just informed you before that if we are going to start like a business in doing something like Bitcoin rewards or whatsoever, that you can get some extra discount if you are using BSV, if you want to buy something from Amazon or any other market, or what they are doing now with Bitrefill. So if we build it in our way, I think the people would like the idea more than the others.
Okay, sounds wonderful. That you're just talking the rebate idea that chatters were saying earlier. You're doing exactly that. That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, so I guess, Ryan, I guess we can maybe close. Do you have any closing thoughts? But also, if you want to tell people where can they learn more about everything you've been talking about? I know you mentioned the MoneyButton documents, but where else can they go?
Sure. So I guess, okay, so probably the best place besides moneybutton.com, which has links to everything, our Telegram group is probably the best other place. For now, it's really good for us if you can just go to our Telegram group if you have questions rather than pinging me on random places. Because what happens is people ask me on using various channels and like just, hey, Ryan, how do I if you can just go to our Telegram group where we're trying to curate our community, that is the best place to ask. Either I will respond to you, Miguel, our engineer, will respond to you, or somebody else will respond to you and help answer your question. So that's t.me/moneybuttonhelp. And aside from that, just go to moneybutton.com and you can find everything else there.
Great. I think I'll mention too, we were just talking this, but we will try and put together a video showing people how to put together a money button, because I think people need to see how easy it is. So I know you mentioned that in the documents, but we'll try and do that ourselves.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan. Steve, you want to take it over here? I'm not sure what you're talking about, but go for it.
Where should we start?
I think maybe if you want to talk about the week that we all have kind of heard about in London, what were you guys working on? And
yeah, sure. Okay, so I guess it was probably a bit of news to a lot of people because we didn't talk a whole lot about it. But the wallet workshop was an idea that was born at the last CoinGeek conference, and it was actually during a conversation with Ryan that I was having with him. And I realized halfway through this conversation, I'd actually had the same conversation with several other wallet developers. So I thought, I mean, conferences like that, they're a good opportunity for everyone to get together, but they're honestly quite hectic when you're sort of trying to take in all the talks and whatnot. There's not a whole lot of time to sit down and thrash out technical issues. So we thought it'd be really great to try this out as a concept and throw a bunch of wallet-focused developers in a room for a week. And we had a very loose agenda. It was very, very kind of flexible and fluid, and see what we could work through. And I think the overwhelming impression from everybody that went along was that it was a roaring success. We got through an immense amount of stuff. And when you've got a bunch of wallet platforms all together in a room talking about standards and new ways of doing things, or rather going back to the old way of doing things, and you can get there, and they're all excited about doing this and delivering this. It's an incredibly powerful thing because I'll give you one concrete example. We talked about the BIP70 payment protocol. It defines a way for a client, a customer, and a payment processor to interact and basically get the details of a transaction passed to the customer, and the customer to create it and get it to the merchant. We wanted to update that, and a few people had independently had thoughts about that. So simply all being in the room together meant we were able to nut through all of the details of this payment protocol, and very, very quickly we had it sorted out. But the key thing is that we also had commitment from 5 or 6 different wallets providers to implement this thing. So that means it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very quickly. Some of the standards have already started to get drafted over the weekend, and I think through the course of next week we'll probably get pretty close to finalizing those. So then the implementation stage begins, and probably we have I don't know the exact number, but maybe 70 or 80% of the wallet market share was represented in that room. So when that many are actually committed to implementing a new standard, then it becomes a fairly compelling proposition for everyone else to follow along. So that level of unity within the ecosystem was fantastic to see. We didn't get everyone there that I would have liked to have had there, because this was the first time, and we wanted to kind of keep it a little bit tight and see how it actually went. But there's definitely an appetite from everyone that participated to be doing this 3 or 4 times a year. So that'll certainly be a much more regular thing. There are other things that we went through. There's a system that we're probably to do with identities that we aren't quite ready to announce yet. We want to flesh some more details out there. We talked about payment channels. Actually, Craig came in and gave us payment channel school. If anyone's familiar with the history of payment channels, Satoshi described a mechanism for payment channels quite early on in probably in 2010 in Bitcoin's life. And it was written off by the core developers as insecure, because the one small aspect of it relied on some zero conf levels of assurance, and we all know what they think of those. But we're in a very different world now as far as zero conf goes. The change of behavior that this new BIP70 protocol puts in place, I guess one key part of it is it shifts the responsibility now from broadcasting the transaction from the customer, and then it has to ping and bounce all the way through the peer-to-peer network before the merchant gets to see it, to the customer sending the transaction to the merchant, and then the merchant, who is actually the one that cares about getting the transaction mined, takes responsibility for sending it to all the miners. So when you couple that with miner ID, which will allow miners to advertise endpoints for submitting transactions, you've really changed the whole zero conf paradigm quite a lot, and got us to a much more zero conf friendly place, which has knock-on effects. It means these old style payment channels that Satoshi described can actually work reliably. They're dead simple, and I think the simple unidirectional payment channel probably covers a huge percentage of all the use cases. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything I've missed. I mean, we went through a huge amount of content over the week. We did also get the chance to, I got a few of the N-Chain research team to come down and present some ideas. I think there was one presentation on MetaNet, one on a new twist, I guess, on SPV and how SPV works. So that was good, because the N-Chain research team is not frequently seen, I guess. I'm sure there's some people out there wonder if they actually exist, but yeah, we got them there, and that was great to get them all to interact. Aside from that, there's actually just a bunch of really cool people. And if you're a Bitcoin nerd like me, sitting in a room talking about Bitcoin tech details for a week is really as good as it gets. So I look forward to the next one, and I'm really looking forward to the next few weeks when we can actually start to pump out and deliver some of the stuff that we agree on.
So if there are wallet developers, or maybe even future potential wallet developers, how could they potentially get in touch and be involved in the next one?
I mean, I'm not that hard to find. You find me on the MetaNet Slack, and find me in various Telegram groups. So yeah, just ping me. Let me know that you're interested. And next time we do it, we'll expand the invitation list. I did organize this whole thing in a bit of a hurry, so I didn't actually, there's probably one or two people who I wish I had have invited, but I didn't get the thought just didn't have a chance to cross my mind in all of the insane rush that the beginning of this year was. But we do, I guess, just to give you a rundown, we had MoneyButton. Ryan also brought a couple of his team from MoneyButton along, so it wasn't just Ryan. I won't out them, but I see one of them's actually here with us tonight. Centby, Handcash, Ina, the CEO of CopPay from Lithuania, came along, and the CTO from Coinify. Also one of the Electrum SV developers. So it was pretty broad representation from the wallet community, and a lot of very clever people throwing in ideas.
So I guess I'll just ask a question since I don't see any yet. But I guess what can we expect next from Bitcoin SV, the node implementation?
Well, the work continues on the scaling testnet. I see Daniel's just joined us. If he wants to jump in and talk about that, I'll leave that one to him. But probably expect some announcements about that over the next week or so. I'm really keen to make a push in the next few weeks to contact all of the wallet developers, exchanges, all the businesses that are running in the Bitcoin SV space, and get them all running a test instance in the scaling testnet of their product, because it's going to be important going forward as we do start to see volume picking up on mainnet, and there are quite a few projects in the works that are likely to bring significant volume over the next 6 months. That everyone has products that are actually properly stress tested. So basically, the scaling testnet it's continuously under stress test, which allows us to test the capacity of the Bitcoin SV node software as we add new changes to the development branch. But also, things like MoneyButton, BitDB, the back ends of Handcash, Centby, all of these things potentially could have issues under extreme load that they're not going to know about until we actually put them under extreme load. So I would like scaling testnet to eventually be quite a close mirror for mainnet. So yeah, that will be good to see if we can get that to happen. What else with Bitcoin SV? I mean, we've got a huge pipeline of changes. I've got a 10-page document that's literally one change per line that I'm currently in the process of expanding out and adding descriptions to all of the changes that need to happen. And that's kind of our roadmap for the next year. So I'll try to get that published once it's actually in a form that's not just my chicken scrawl on a piece of paper. We made a lot of progress. Again, having everyone there for the wallet workshop was great for this, to talk about sunsetting P2SH and replacing P2SH. Basically provides one useful service, which is a universal way of providing Bitcoin addresses for any type of output script. The BIP70 thing solves that problem because you're not giving people Bitcoin addresses anymore. You're telling them what the output script is you want them to pay to. So, and pay to script hash also creates a whole bunch of other problems for us. So we were able to walk through that process, how we thought we might be able to sunset P2SH and get rid of it. And it's not going to be a short process, but maybe November of this year, or possibly even squeezing into early next year. I'm not sure, but it was good that everyone was there because we could see there was actually an appetite for getting it done, and the changes that need to be made to do it without causing disruption need to be made not just in Bitcoin SV node software, but also in wallets. So, we never would have been able to do this without being able to have those conversations with wallet devs. Mm.
Joshua is asking if part of the standardization process that was talked about includes standardizing derivation paths across wallets.
There was some talk about that. I'm probably not the best person to go into a lot of detail because derivation paths are one of my my weaker areas of Bitcoin knowledge. But we did actually talk about a standardized method of wallet restoration and wallet backup, which obviously would cover that. What I've got to do this week is sit down and basically brain dump everything that we talked about last week, and make sure that we've captured all of the high level subjects so that we don't miss anything. It has been my experience in the past. I've done workshops where you've had an incredibly productive week of fantastic ideas, and then 2 weeks later, no one can remember what any of them are. So I've learned from that experience that you really do have to get on top of that as soon as the workshop's over. So I think we'll do some public communications about the content of the workshop after we've worked through that process, just so people have got a better idea.
You mentioned sunsetting P2SH. I know it's not up to you, but maybe it's more up to miners. But generally, do you have an idea of when we could see non-standard scripts start coming into play?
I would like them as soon as possible. The only issue with that is there's a couple of what's the word, safety measures, I guess I want to put in place first. So when you open up scripts you basically take all of the limits off scripts. There are some attacks that exist with scripts that are quadratic in nature. So when you have a small script, the impact of the attack in terms of causing lots of CPU usage or something is quite small, but if you double it, then the impact is multiplied by 4, and if you double it again by another 4, it's exponential in nature. And we came across this when we were looking at getting rid of the limit on the number of opcodes in a script. And the reason why we actually dialed that back from removing the limit altogether to just raising it to 500 or 520, whatever it was because in a fairly short space of time while I was researching around this subject, I came across 3 different known attack vectors, 2 of which have been fixed in the past, 1 of which still hadn't. And it got me to thinking, well, if it took me that long to find 3, how many more are there that I don't know about? So we need to attack this problem in 2 ways. One is the whack-a-mole approach. We find all of these potential high CPU costs attack type scripts, and we fix whatever it is that's wrong with the code that makes them possible. But the other thing is how do we mitigate against the risk of the ones we don't know about? And that's basically solved by parallel transaction validation. So once that code path is fully multi-threaded, what we can do is we can assign, let's say 12 out of the 16 threads will only process standard types of transactions. Or when I say standard, I mean, well understood types of transactions. And the other 4 will be reserved for anything weird that we don't recognize. So if someone creates an attack script that does lock up the CPU for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, it'll only lock these ones, the non-priority pipes, and the other 12 will just keep pumping through transactions. So the vast majority of Bitcoin will just carry on without any issues. So that's kind of a prerequisite. Once we've done that, then there's no barrier left to us. We can get rid of the limit on the number of opcodes per script, the limit on the size of scripts, the size of transactions. A whole bunch of limits can get knocked over once that's taken care of. So in terms of time frame, I'd probably like to get that parallel validation path sorted out within the next 2 or 3 months. Daniel hasn't got his camera on, so I can't see if he's having a heart attack at me saying that. And then, after that, we can start loosening the reins somewhat. It's probably important actually to mention that we can't sunset P2SH until we've done that as well, because the replacement for multi-sig is actually what we call bare multi-sig, which is just a raw multi-sig script, which is non-standard at the moment.
Yeah, makes sense. Does anyone have any questions? Want to put their hand up? I guess there's a question here. Is there any bigger risk of non-standard scripts than just locking up the processing power of the node? And how do you measure or address those risks?
That's probably the key risk that I can see. I mean, large scripts, I guess, can chew up a lot of bandwidth and disk space, but I mean, this is Bitcoin SV, and we don't tend to worry ourselves too much about that. And you can solve that problem in other ways as well. People freaked out last year about the notion of Raven signature scripts, because when you're limited to 32-bit math operations, those Raven signature scripts could be like a megabyte in size. What I don't think we've thought about enough yet is the fact that the vast majority of that script is actually basically a standard template. So in terms of storage, it's hugely compressible. If you know that a Raven signature script consists of 100 kilobytes of fairly constant opcodes, and then a variable, and then another 100 kilobytes of constant opcodes, you can replace all of those constant opcode sequences with just like a single marker. And you can transmit across the network or store on disk in this form, and then you just expand it into its full form in memory when you want to evaluate the script to see if it's spendable. So yeah, I don't see too many other issues around killing off those limits.
I don't see any other questions. I'm trying to think if I have any for you. I don't know. What else is going on in your world?
Well, I guess we're starting to think about the CoinGeek conference coming up in Toronto in May. I presume there'll be some announcements about that in the next week or two. So that'll be another chance for us all to get together in some random corner of the globe. In terms of Enchain, I mean, we're busy winding up our capacity. I don't know if it's of much interest to people, but we're hiring a new software development manager in soon, and that poor bastard's first job is going to be to hire a huge number of new devs so that we can expand our capability into various areas. Brad, should I dob you in for your new job?
Yeah, you can.
So Brad's, I mentioned before, we want to make a big push to get businesses on board with the scaling testnet. Brad's just been given the job of scaling testnet ops operations manager. That's basically because we need to really make the scaling testnet professional. We've got to make sure that we don't have services on it going down. We've got to have a point of contact where people can get support when they're trying to install their instances on it. So we'll be throwing more resources at scaling testnet. What else is going on? I don't know. I'm gonna think of like 5 things that I should have talked about as soon as this is over, but they're not leaping to mind right now.
If there's someone that's listening that thinks they'd make a good fit at Enchain, what can they do?
That what?
If they think they'd make a good fit at Enchain or can contribute, where can they go?
Contact me. There's a couple of Enchainers here, which I think you probably all know. Daniel, Brad. Contact any of us. Let us know that you're interested. I'm more than happy to to be hiring people out of spaces like this, MetaNet ICU and whatnot. There's a lot of Bitcoin knowledge in these places. So I think in terms of our dev teams, we're going to be focusing a bit more in the near future, in a slightly different direction. So we've got a lot of capacity with C++ and Java, which we need because they're languages that are kind of more applicable to certain types of projects. But what we don't have a lot of in-house is what I call rapid development languages like JavaScript, Node.js, Python, etc. So we'd like to start building our capabilities in those areas a little more over the next few months. So if there's someone out there that's got that kind of skill set and you've got some background in Bitcoin, then by all means get in touch, because finding good devs with a solid background in Bitcoin is not the easiest thing in the world. So
great. I don't see any more questions. So Steve, unless you have anything else, we can move on here. We have a general question about what happened to the hash rate, but I don't know if you're a miner, Steve.
I'm not a miner, and I don't keep a really close eye on it. I mean, I am in touch with them, and I help them out with technical issues and stuff quite a lot. But yeah, I don't keep my finger on the hash rate pulse too much. What has happened with it? Has it dropped recently or something?
I think it dropped a few days ago. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Has it come back up again, or did it just drop for a bit?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure. Not really. It has not come up, apparently.
Okay. No, sorry, I don't know. Don't know the answer to that question. Some economic decision that someone made somewhere, I guess. That's generally what seems to drive miner behavior.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I don't see any more questions for you. So if you think of anything else, let us know. But Joel, am I moving on to you? Are you next? Or am I cutting it?
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? Yeah, brilliant. I was going to do an unrecorded bit and talk about business applications. Yeah, I'm going to make that unrecorded because I want to let everyone else here get ahead of the game. But mentioning this recorded, so that also for other people listening to this, if you are interested in getting ahead of the game, the MetaNet ICU, and learning more about the MoneyButton, well, just MoneyButton, or getting in touch with Bitcoin SV, the reference client. I call it the reference client. The ICU calls it the reference client. Do get a hold of Steve or Daniel Connolly. Both of them can be reached on Twitter or via the Bitcoin SV site. Or you can hassle us in the Slack. If you can find your way to the Slack, you can get in touch with them personally. Also on the MetaNet ICU site, there's a link for various Telegram groups. If you find the right one, you might find them hanging around in one of those as well. Over to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joel. So I guess we will conclude the recorded part and echo that if you want, you can stay on and we'll have some unmoderated, unrecorded discussion. So thanks for joining. And I've stopped recording.